You are listening to
The Shredcast.
No tendies, baby.
It's the health code for snowboarders.
Let's send it.
Welcome back to the Shredcast, everyone. I am so stoked because today we have mobility duo, so Mark and Sarah. If you guys don't know, they're a yoga instructor slash physical therapist duo. They've taken the freaking snowboard community by storm. They have crazy Instagram content and just absolutely killing it and a bunch of other stuff. So super stoked to have you guys here. How are you doing?
So good.
So good.
Honestly, it's been the most beautiful fall day here in Bend. So yeah, happy as clams.
That's awesome. I know. I'm so stoked fall is coming. It's starting to be a little brisk in the morning. I'm like, winter, finally.
Yeah, I took dude on a walk this morning and all the rooftops were frozen and it looked like snow. And I was like,
I know. I love it. I love it. I'm out in Arizona, so our mornings are starting to get colder, but during the day, not so much. But
yeah,
I
for sure.
I live up north, so not nearly like Phoenix or anything like that.
Yeah. What mountain do you have near you that you're able to go to?
Yeah, it's called Snowboard, so it's
Okay.
20 minutes away from me. It's pretty small, but
That's awesome.
yeah, super
Right.
sick.
I saw a guy out here for rehab that moved from, that was his mountain.
Yeah.
Snowball?
He moved to Bend.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, most people don't, which is, it honestly makes it pretty cool. And I mean, we don't get crazy amounts of snow or anything, but we have a pretty solid season, November to May-ish. So
Yeah, and I bet you have a great community too, because if people are willing to ski and snowboard in Arizona, they must love it.
yeah, seriously, it's little small town vibes. So there's a college town up here. That's how I moved up here. Is I originally went to college, and then I just fell in love with it, and I was like, I have to stay.
Oh, that's so
Very cool.
cool.
Yeah.
That's
Awesome.
awesome.
But yeah, I just kind of wanted to learn more about you guys and how you even got into snowboarding. Obviously, you're from Oregon, but from what I know from listening to other podcasts and stuff, you weren't originally from Bend, and Bachelor isn't necessarily your home mountain. So how did you kind of get into all of that?
Yeah, so we both got into it at separate times, so I guess I can go first, but we're originally from really small towns in Oregon. So I'm from Dallas, Oregon, not the Dalles, but Dallas. It's more towards the coast. And I went to Timberline, was my first mountain for 9 years, I want to say, before we moved over here to Bend. And I drove about an hour and 45 minutes every single time to go to the mountain because that was the closest we could ever get. And we would just rally. The crew would wake up at 5 a.m. We'd all meet at this parking lot, carpool, get coffee, make all the stops, and then make it up by parking lot, hopefully get a spot by 7:30. But yeah, so Timberline was my home mountain for 9 years. I absolutely loved it, but we also got Bachelor. Now that we're at Bachelor, it's really hard. Timberline still feels like home, and the community there still feels like home, but it feels like a little playground because Bachelor is so huge, and we've just grown so much at Bachelor that when we go back to Timberline, we're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest feelings is when you are progressing, but you don't realize it, and you go back to wherever, maybe it's your home, maybe it's a friend's mountain or whatever, and you realize, oh shit, I've surpassed my buddies or whatever, my colleagues, and I'm actually gotten a lot better than I think, because it's hard to see those small growth spurts until you compare it to some objective evidence, or whether that's skill, or I don't know.
Right, the terrain at Timberline, there's certain parts where I used to be like, oh, that's so big. And then we've ridden at Bachelor for so long. And if you know the terrain at Bachelor, if anyone's watching knows the terrain, it is a giant playground within the trees of just natural features everywhere. And so when we go back to Timberline, I'm like, ah.
Yeah, I've ridden Timberline, but I've never been to Bachelor, but I've heard it's kind of like surfing. It's not a ton of vertical terrain, but a lot of rolling hills and stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
It's a lot
the
of natural features.
natural features are everywhere. The trees, we used to be park junkies, and now we hardly ever ride park because the trees are our park.
Yeah, that's so cool. I wish I had that. I'm definitely more of a park junkie because that's kind of what we have.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started when I was 16, my brother was a snowboarder. So obviously like I wanted to follow his footsteps, his older brother. But I went to a place called Willamette Pass, which is near
Mhm.
Eugene. That was like my
Okay.
first mountain, and it's so small.
Yeah,
I think it's the steepest hill
it
in
is.
Oregon,
Yeah.
but it's like just a few runs. It's definitely a local hill. It sounds very similar to yours.
Yeah.
Um, but that's where I used to go, and then I would periodically go to Timberline. And then in college, I went to Oregon State. You could get free or not free, but cheap passes to either Hood or Bachelor, and we would like switch it up. So we'd rally to Bachelor. It was like an hour and some change away, and then we'd go to park my car at my parents' house and rally up to Timberline. And yeah, we just it wasn't until I met Sarah that it started to become way more consistent. Before it was like 10 times a year because
Mhm.
that's the pass I could afford. I was poor, and then it became a bigger part of our life, so we'd go a little bit more. And yeah,
Mhm.
so unfortunately, snowboarding wasn't like a part of my childhood. I wish it was. Like we'd go
Yeah,
occasionally. We go
same.
skiing like once a year, but we just didn't have the money to be able to do that consistent. We didn't live close enough to it,
Mhm.
and it was 2 hours away for us. So
Yeah.
it was just like my teenage years where it started to become a bigger part of my life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Same thing for me too. I grew up in Southern California, so the closest mountain was Big Bear, again, like 2 hours away if we're lucky. Like I was back there last year riding, and it was like 5 hours with traffic. It's
Oh,
ridiculous.
wow. That's
So
crazy.
at that point, it's like just drive to Mammoth.
Yeah.
But yeah, like same thing. I think I skied like twice growing up, and it wasn't until I moved here for school that I actually like picked it up.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Hindsight, like even if you start in your teenage years, you're still so
So
young.
young.
But in regards to if you're trying to become whatever, let's say semi-professional or at that level, like yeah, you need to start when you're a child, just
Mhm.
to be able to get the body mechanics and the
The
brain, frontal
awareness.
cortex, all that stuff connected. And but there are outliers, but I think yeah, you need to start when you're a baby.
Yeah, I agree. I wish I started younger. I mean, there's a few people that I knew in college, mostly men, because for some reason you guys don't have like a fear of anything.
Yeah,
But they would start when they were like 18, come to school, and they would be throwing tens in like 2 years. And I was like, must be nice.
Oh, I also think there's an aspect of like, I don't know about you, but for me, when I started snowboarding, I didn't know a single woman. I didn't know a single girl. I didn't have like social media. I didn't have TV. I wasn't on computer. Like I wasn't an online kid growing up. I was homeschooled on a farm. And so like by the time I actually found out what snowboarding was, like it was all I knew was Timberline. And there were not many women doing it. And so like a lot of guys, they see guys throwing tens and they're like, oh, that means I can do it. But then girls, like I didn't see any girls throwing backflips or tens. So like I was just trying to keep up with the boys. But it
Yeah.
would have been really cool to have had that representation because then I probably would have achieved more at a
Mhm.
younger age because having a girl to look up to would have been huge.
mm,
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm the type of person where like I grew up doing like surfing and like a little bit of skating and like other stuff that's mainly like men take over those sports for the most part. So like I had no problem just being like, oh, the guys can do it, like I can do it.
Mhm.
But I also know that like inherently I would freak myself out. And like that was my biggest drawback of like I know I should be able to do it, but I can't get myself to do it. And I feel like that was like the hardest thing for me for progression.
Totally.
100%. Yeah. I think that's changing though. You're seeing the sport shift to a lot of women now having more of that spotlight,
Mhm.
being role models for younger girls and throwing crazy stuff. And we've talked about this, and even like you'll talk to professionals who talk about this, like women's snowboarding and sports in general is so exciting right now because they're progressing so quickly,
Mhm.
and you're seeing that versus men. Like there's a ceiling to a point. Like obviously they're still doing amazing stuff, but women, you're seeing them progress so fast and doing
Mhm.
incredible stuff, and it's so fun to watch.
In every realm, not even
Every
just
realm.
snowboarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree. Like, and it's starting to become such a thing with like women's sports. Like, more people are watching women's sports. Like, it's super cool to watch. And I know I love like watching the new up and coming snowboarders. Like, maybe they're not doing anything crazy, but they're the females that are like trying the bigger features or like going into that kind of stuff. And I think it's super sick to watch and honestly does motivate me. And you kind of get that little bit of like, okay, they're doing it. Like, I can do it, you know?
100%.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah, so I kind of like I guess pivoting on that, but not really. Obviously, you guys do physical therapy, you do yoga, like it's more on the human body rather than like snowboarding, but then you combine the two. So, how did that kind of start up? Like, when did you decide that you wanted to make your professions like snowboarding oriented?
Yeah, so when the pandemic happened, we were kind of left with nothing. So Mark just finished his schooling, his doctorates, and then all my jobs were service-based, like massage therapy, personal training, yoga, were just non-essential. And so we were kind of sitting ducks for a little bit. We moved back in with Mark's parents, and we were like, okay, like we're not the kind of people that can just sit still and not do anything. So like, okay, how do we like progress from here? And we're like, the world is going online, so how do we go online? And honestly, the only way I knew how to do it was through social media, because I was like, you can be whatever you want to be on social media, you just have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about putting in the time and the work, and it's going to be unpaid for a long time, but eventually it will pay off. And so we were like, okay, let's pick one demographic, because we love to do other things. Like we both rock climb, we both play soccer, we both I don't know, bike all the time, mountain bike, road bike. Like we love all sports, but snowboarding is just like that's like my truest passion. Like snowboarding is my favorite thing in the world. And Mark, I think, would say soccer.
I love soccer so much.
But but he's also a strong snowboarder. I'm a little bit less of a soccer junkie. And so we chose snowboarding. And yeah, ever since then we've just been working on it and learning as we go, because this did not come natural to either of us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just started body work for snowboarders.
Mm-hmm.
For
And
me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, you started it fully online. You weren't doing any of it beforehand.
Oh yeah. No, we were doing our own practices beforehand, like me doing, everything I mentioned, massage therapy, personal training, yoga, and he was doing physical
I
therapy.
was working in clinic. So this was like our grind after work.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super sick. I mean, same kind of thing for me. My degree is actually in engineering, so total opposite side of the spectrum,
Oh.
but I never really liked it. Just kind of was like, oh, this is something I guess I have to do, go to school, get a degree. Never really found anything that I like wanted to do. For a long time it was physical therapy and I just never really pursued it.
Yeah.
And so when I got out of school, I got a job like I was supposed to, and I was like, this sucks. Like, I hate this. And so for the longest time, I was like, snowboarding's my actual passion. Another passion of mine is like horseback riding. I did that competitively growing up, but I was like, I can't make money doing either of these things. So let me figure out how I can and like actually enjoy my work. And so, yeah, just kind of like started putting things together, putting things out there and seeing if people were down with it. And honestly, like seeing you guys make it something of it gave me a lot more confidence to try it and see what I could do. So yeah, I do really appreciate that. Still very small, still growing, but it's been really fun to like connect with other people and see people actually like love that they can work out and like gain confidence from it and like feel like they can snowboard until they're older and like decrease their pain, all those kinds of things. It's just super cool.
It
I
is
love it.
really cool. And it's kind of like some days we're like, are we doing anything? Like, like some days we're like, are we helping people? I don't really know. And then randomly we'll get a message that is like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like this changed the game for me, X, Y, or Z, like whether it was yoga or our workout program. And it's moments like that where like it's just so rewarding. I always say that's the paycheck, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not just a number on the other side of this. There's people on the other side of on these profiles, and what we're doing actually matters, even though we don't see it every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And
really
I
cool.
think it's also amazing when you just talked about that. This is the first time in history where we can grind and have a side hustle on top of our job or career, whatever you want to call it, and transition into something totally different. Whereas before, I think Gary Vee talks about this, but like let's say like even in the 90s where you had a job and like
Mm,
you had to come home and scroll through a dictionary or an encyclopedia or through the phone book or whatever it is you were doing to try to transition to something else. It's the first time in history where you can do these things simultaneously, and you can reach millions of people. Like, it's so crazy. Like, we have a map now on our Snowga page of our current and past members, and like we just got someone from Russia the other day, like freaking Jerusalem, like all over Europe. Like, we have
Crazy.
so crazy, and how amazing this social media can be, and there's
Mhm.
so many benefits to it, and how many people we've helped. But unfortunately, it also gets a lot of flack because there is also a lot of negative side to it. But I think that gets way too much attention, and I think we should transition towards all the positives that have come
Mm.
from this. And like, thank you so much for the kind words, but like, we're living our dream. Like,
Mm.
we have this passion for the human body and movement and biomechanics and snowboarding. We get to give and spread that message to others and educate, and watch people change their lives and improve on and off the mountain. So yeah, we're blessed,
Very
to be
blessed.
honest.
Yeah.
Hey snowboarders, I'm interrupting this podcast to talk about Snap supplements. This supplement brand was founded by immigrant friends who grew up on local gardens and organic farms. After coming to the US and realizing that the standard Western diet was lacking in quality nutrients, they decided to create Snap supplements. I am so stoked because this supplement brand is focused on natural, clean vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. We're here for longevity in this sport of snowboarding, which is exactly why I loved partnering with Snap. I have gained natural energy from the use of their nitric oxide beets, and they have an amazingly non-grainy vegan protein powder, as well as a lot of other vitamins for joint health, digestive health, a bunch of other stuff. So if you're interested, you can either click the link in the description or use code FUNCTIONAL at checkout to receive 15% off. All right, let's get back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and what's crazy for me is obviously this is like pretty much your guys' full-time job now. I know you used to have like other jobs, but this is officially full-time now.
Yeah.
Year
For
now.
2 years.
For me, like a year.
Yeah. For me, 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because like for me, it's not. And like obviously I'm just starting. And what's crazy about it, I think, is that yeah, this is like a second job. Yeah, I'm working constantly. Like there is no free time anymore. But it's like I'm when I get to do this, this isn't work. Like I'm getting to connect with people. I'm getting to help people. I'm not really making the money, but I'm still wanting to do it because I'm like, this is great. Like this is fun. This is my passion. And that's really what drives it more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Like I'll lose sleep thinking over like movements. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to show this movement, and I won't be able to sleep unless I get up and write it down. Like
Yep.
the fact that our career like gives us that, like that passion and motivation and drive is we're really lucky because not everybody loves their job.
Yeah.
And I think once that motive shifts, once you start looking at anything in aspect of monetary, how much money am I going to make from this? That's when the whole perspective changes. That's when you know you're going in the wrong direction. It
Mhm.
has to be like what you just said, where you truly love what you do, and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're like, oh shit, like I should probably go to bed. But you don't realize that you've actually been working for 12 to 14 hours straight. Yeah, and I'm totally guilty of that. Like, she has to tell me to stop. But
Yeah, I do.
as cliche as it sounds, right? Like, it doesn't feel like work. Like, yes, it's stressful at times and my brain hurts, but like, I have never had something like this where I love it so much, where there within clinic, when I was working in clinic, like, there Sunday night, you just get like that anxiety in your stomach, like, oh man, like this, I just need to
Don't want to go in.
try to change my perspective. I need to watch a motivational video, get up early and have a nice breakfast, and then just go in headstrong and get through the day. I haven't had that feeling in a year, and it's like such a mental health game changer.
Mhm.
I hope and wish everyone can finally reach this place, because I know many people are in that anxiety game, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. Like nothing drained me more than like working in industry, working the 9 to 5, like doing the grind. I was just like, this is not for me. This is not how I want to live my life. And I was like, we live in a time where I don't have to if I really don't want to. I was like, this is gonna be like the scariest thing I've ever done, but if I don't try it, then I'm gonna regret it. So if it fails, at least I tried, you know?
And
Exactly.
yeah, I was just talking to a girlfriend who wanted to go out on her own business wise, but she was really afraid to. And I was like, yeah, but can you imagine, like, if you get done with this life and you didn't even try? Like, it would be better to try and fail than to not try at all and wonder what if.
Yep,
You know, like
exactly.
I would rather have that what if answered.
100%. And earlier you guys kind of mentioned, and I did want to talk about this, is like the counterculture of like snowboard fitness or just like the unconventional nature of like, I don't know, going to the gym and taking care of your health in like snowboard culture. Because obviously snowboarding's like decently new, like what the 80s was about when it came up. And it was mainly going from like park skate rats to snowboarding, and like most people didn't like them and they were like their own thing, and like even to this day like a lot of skaters and stuff, and the shift is starting to change with that too. But it's like, why would I work out? Like, and I have a lot of park rat friends and they're like, yeah, okay, you do your thing. I'm like, all right, well, you guys will regret it eventually. But you kind of want to like talk about that and like what drew you into this?
So a couple things. I will never judge someone for not being or wanting to get into fitness or apply those two things. Because one, like working out in a gym or whatever your form of working out is hard. And it takes time and motivation and there has to be passion behind that. So and that's okay. If that's not your thing, that's fine.
Yep.
There's no judgment here.
Mhm.
The second is like I respect snowboard culture. I think culture is so important and it should continue to live on. But we also have to understand that humans are adaptable, times change, and culture changes. So I respect snowboard culture. I will always look back and it'll always be foundational.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to look at it and respect what snowboarding is changing into. You just said it yourself, snowboarding started in the 80s. Let's say if you were 20 years old in your 80s, you may be in your what, 40s, 50s now. Let's say you still love snowboarding, you still want to go out. But to be honest, from a biological standpoint, you can't do the same thing in your 50s that you did when you're 18 or 20 years old. And that requires a little bit more emphasis on maybe taking care of yourself, whether that includes eating well, sleeping, training if you want to. There's just a whole plethora of things that you probably have to look into because your body's changing, and that's fine.
And your body has probably taken a toll if you grew up being a park rat, you know, like you've probably been taking a beating a couple times.
Yeah. So I guess in saying that, to answer your question, like we're not trying to change anyone's mind or change the culture. We're just applying our passions and what we know from a scientific standpoint and letting you know that if you take these steps, I promise you will be able to do this longer. Because when you are 30 and 40 and you want to continue to go to the mountain with your kids, like you're gonna look back and be like, man, I should have taken care of myself maybe in my 20s. And some people will be able to get away with it. They won't have to do
Outliers.
anything in their 20s, their teens, and they'll still be able to do that. And that's great. But for a far majority of us, it's not the case. Like I'm almost 36 years old, and I look at my friends that are the same age, and I'm like, damn, like you've got kids, they got dad bods, and they're still trying to get at it, and it's not the same. Like your mind is still there, but your body's not. And
Yeah.
great way to analogy is like on the soccer field. I hear this all the time. Like you're going for the ball and your foot's just not going. It's not fast enough. You're in your grip or whatever, and you're just like, man, my mind was totally there, but my body, my fast twitch muscles aren't there. And it's no different for snowboarding.
Yeah. I also think that in like the competitive world has changed so much too. Like back in the day, you'd be able to party the night before, and some can still do this now. Like Mark said, there's always people who still can do that. But like you'd be able to party and like be high or be drunk on the mountain and compete and still win. But the features back then, like look at a half pipe in the 80s, 90s, and then look at a half pipe now. Like it's, and look at huge, like it's hugely different. And so like kids now that never has this happened before where it's like 12-year-olds are training into airbags. And you know, like you have to do all this training into foam pits and trampolines, because if you mess up on the mountain, what they're throwing, those features and the size of them are massive. So you have to work out to be able to do this. You have to train on your board, off your board, you you know, in a gym that has like the foam pits and the mattresses and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't like I don't know how you'd compete in today's era.
You can't, honestly. It's kind of turned into like gymnastics instead of snowboarding in some events, which is a whole other thing. I know you guys love the bomb hole, which like I do too. And so I love like getting people's opinions on like if you watch snowboard competitions nowadays, like what do you guys personally think about like the tricks getting that big and being that crazy compared to like what they used to be? And I guess like the idea of style versus like how many spins can you get?
Yeah, it's so hard because I have no right to speak in this area. Like I'm not
Just personal opinion.
professional, but personal opinion. I love watching people like Zeb Powell,
Oh my
who
gosh, yeah.
has so much style. And like at like on one of the X Games, like he didn't care about the points because he knew like he had to do X, Y, and Z to get more points from the judges. But instead he flips over his friend on the
Like sliding off the board.
like on the
So
hug. Like
sweet.
it's just I don't know. I really love stuff like that. Not to say that people like Marcus Cleveland aren't amazing snowboarders and can spin to their heart's desire. Like that's amazing. That's incredible. They should. I don't know. I feel like there's two different progressions of the sport. Like, yeah, this one thing is really difficult to do, and the person who can do more of it, that's really incredible. But honestly, it comes down to the bigger the feature, the more the spins, the more you can like I don't know. There's only so much you can do there. Whereas there's also style, and I enjoy watching the style more. And I think there should be points for that.
Yeah.
Answer your question.
Yeah, I agree. I think anyone would be hard pressed to argue any different. I think style and steez is just aesthetically more pleasing to everybody, and it's still respected. And unfortunately, I think progression requires the spins, and that's just what, as a competition rider, especially like a slope style or like whatever, like you just have to do it, and they understand that, and they're going to do it. How that's going to change, I don't know. But you hear the professionals talking about it, like spin to win. It's just part of the game right now, and you have to play it that way because you have to win to get the sponsors and to keep the lights on and to get the attention on you. And I wouldn't, again, I'm not qualified to talk about this because
Yeah.
I'm not a professional snowboarder, but I would do the same
Yeah.
if I had that ability.
But
So
I also think really cool things are coming out of the woodworks, like natural selection.
yeah,
Like events like that are coming out. Like the Bomb Hole had their own event, which is really
Yep.
like
hmm
stuff like that is really cool. Like
yeah, wheel
and
jams are coming back.
yeah,
It's
I
pretty
think the
sweet.
culture is shifting back a little bit. I think it's just a growing sport, and there's gonna be growing pains, and there's gonna be a bunch of different directions it can
Mhm.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. The main reason I brought it up too is just because a lot of people, and I get this a lot in my comments, is like, oh, like snowboard's an art, not a sport. Why would I be training for it? But like personally, I like to think of it as it being both because while I do think that, yes, I agree, I love style, I love watching style, my whole goal is not to do a 1080, it is to do like a really seized out 3. Like I want to have style and like really own stuff. That's my personal goal. I'm not saying any other goals are whatever, like you can do whatever you want. But I think that training for me personally has actually helped with my freestyle riding, which people would argue is like the art, not the sport side. So I think that it really is both. And that's why I advocate for this for so much is like it helped my progression more than anything else. Obviously, health benefits and like taking care of your body. But like I am on the younger side, so I haven't really hit that like body aches, anything yet. So I'm like, and so for me, I'm like, I just want to get better. And I have like, because I started when I had fear. Most people start when they don't have fear. So like a lot of those tricks are not just like mind and muscle connection. Yeah, it's still like I have to think about it constantly. And so knowing what I can do off the snow has really helped me on the snow.
Sure.
Yep. I think you're right on all points there. Like snowboarding is an art. And that's the beauty of it. Like I think I was watching who's that skateboarder that just tore his ACL? The Life of Ryan, Ryan, whatever his name is. Anyways,
I don't know.
he was talking about like, or there was a famous photographer. He was talking about like skateboarding is so amazing because the progression is always there in regards to, if I'm going to a city, like the city's always growing and changing. And those features are always going to change. The streets are always going to change. The tricks are always going to grow. It's no different with snowboarding. Like, you have an entire mountain that you can be whoever you want to be and create whatever you want to create. It's a giant playground. And so, yeah, there's the art side of it. And then you're right, that training aspect to it is going to help that, whether that's through strength, your ability to extend, create power, to rotate, awareness in the air. Like, it checks all of the boxes. Anyone who argues differently doesn't know what they're talking about.
I agree. Because it really does. And I think a lot of the times for people that either start older or are older, and like personally, I think the biggest thing that people struggle with is fear. Like, yeah, the body aches, yeah, the pain, but I think fear overtakes all of that. And there's really not much you can do for overcoming fear other than gaining more confidence. And there's like all these other ways that you can gain more confidence, but I think like knowing what your body is capable of, which many people don't. They think my body can do this, I think my body can do this, but they've never really tested the limits. And I think training allows you to really test those limits, and you're like, wow, I can do this, now I can bring it to snow.
Yeah, and then also like having a good progression scale, like whether that is in the gym or on the mountain, like knowing where your actual capabilities are. Because like I started when I was 18, and I had zero fear. Like I felt invincible, and I went off like a triple XL jump in the spring and had,
oh my gosh,
it was way too sticky, and I landed right on the knuckle and I broke my clavicle. And ever since then, I was like, oh, this sport can hurt you. Like, it was like that moment of like, oh, I didn't realize you could actually get hurt doing this. But like, I didn't know that I had no place being on that jump. Like, in my mind, I was like, I can do anything, which is also, I think, of a superpower. I think that's confidence is huge, because if you go in scared, you're gonna fuck up. Like, but if you go in with confidence, you can nail it, but there's that progression. It's like, okay, where am I at realistically? Do I already know how to take off and land? If not, should I hit a triple XL jump? Probably not. Like, do I know how to do a 180? Okay, well, maybe you do know how to do a 180, but can you ride out switch? Like, how comfortable are you with your switch riding? So like, just knowing what your foundation is and how your progression is growing in both realms, like, I think is really important too.
Yeah, I also want to reiterate, like, in any sport, nothing can recreate the actual sport. So yes, while training off the mountain can help and supplement it, nothing is going to be as good as actually performing the sport. So whether that's, if you're trying to progress in snowboarding, nothing's going to do that but snowboarding. So if you're on a program, that in-season training is going to be majority snowboarding. If I'm a soccer player, nothing is going to recreate my ability to play soccer but playing soccer in a real game situation. But then also, to go to Sarah's discussion here, like, mindset is everything. Whether you are going into your day, whether for a job that you really hate, whether you are going into a jump, like, you need to visualize success. If you don't, you're going to fail. And that you can apply that to any point in your life. And that our minds are so powerful. Like, unfortunately, science is unable to really quantify what our minds are capable of and what we can do with them. But you hear it over and over from the most successful people in the world. These guys and girls visualize their paths years before they actually achieve their goals. And you have to do that with, whether that's snowboarding, whether it's life, whether that's family, whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that really just comes down to that progression of like knowing what you want to achieve and like knowing all of the little steps that'll take you to get there. And like that same thing in life, that same thing if going on the mountain. And I do love what you say that like, yes, nothing can replicate anything like snowboarding as snowboarding can. But something I always say to people, just because this is my own personal experience, obviously everyone's different, but I was riding 100, 120 days a season when I first started, with the worst body mechanics you've ever seen in your life. I looked awful. And so I wasn't making any progression goals because I just didn't know how to. I didn't realize that my body was doing certain things. And it wasn't until I like broke it back down off snow, after also breaking my collarbone, and then really looked at my body mechanics and was like, okay, this is actually awful. Let me retry this over. And then I was able to progress in like 16 days.
Yeah.
So I think like, yes, snowboarding is like, I'm never going to progress snowboarding unless I'm actually snowboarding. But I think taking that step back, if you're like, so many snowboarders get so stuck and they're like, season after season after season, I'm at the same level and I can't get better. And I think that's when you should be like, okay, well, why can't I get better? What is my body actually doing?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
you're
think
right.
like anything like training, whether it's yoga, whether it's what we do in the gym, whether it's mental training, or like meditation, whatever it is off of the mountain is supplemental. Like obviously you can't, like Mark said, you can't become a good snowboarder without snowboarding, but you also can do all of these things while you're not in season, or while it's in season, just to keep you strong and keep you able, because we have a lot of comments or people who write in saying like, you don't need this, all you need to do is snowboard. Someone the other day was like, you need to snowboard 2 hours every day, or no, sorry, 2 hour sessions 3 days a week and you'll be a great snowboarder. And I was like, how nice it would be if that was the equation for everybody.
Yeah.
But everyone's different.
Yeah.
And you'll have a snowboarder who is 50 years old and just starting and needs to have a little bit more power and a little bit more strength in the body to even ride, or else like going down is like a really big deal and it actually like affects your body a lot. And so you
Yeah.
need to do that training off the mountain. And then you have the snowboarder who's, I don't know, age doesn't really matter, but like who's young and has no fear and can bounce back, and they might be like, oh, I don't need to train. I'm like, okay, you might not think you need to right now, but look how good you could be, or how what's the word I'm looking for, sustainable you could be if you did,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because it's supplemental.
Yeah. And I mean, like Mark said earlier, like if you don't want to, like don't. But
Yeah.
what I really love and like something I want to get into with you guys is like for me, I don't do yoga. I'm not a yogi. Like I do some mobility work, but like that's definitely not my strong suit. And so if someone comes to me and they're like, "Oh, well, your style of training just isn't for me." I'm like, "Great. Go do yoga with mobility duo. Go do this with this person. Go do this with this person." Like not every style of training is necessarily going to work for you or be what you enjoy. And I feel like the last thing you should be doing if your goal is to like have some certain result out of it is like find what you enjoy, because otherwise you're not going to be able to like sustain what you're doing. So I do want to talk about yoga with you guys, because obviously that's like your main thing. That's like why you grew so big is your snoga, which is literally so cool. And it's such a like an out there concept that like I love that it grew so quickly. And I've been following you guys for a super long time before I even started any of this. And it's just really cool to watch. And you recently went to Bali. So I'd love to like talk more about that and like your whole yoga experience and how you got to what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started yoga. I went to high school. I went to public school in high school, was when I stopped doing homeschooling. And when I did, they offered a elective that was yoga. And so that's where I found yoga, was like freshman year of high school. And I fell in love with it. And ever since I've been doing my own practice. So it's been like 14, 15 years, something like that, that I've been practicing. And it has saved me both mentally and physically so many times. Um, and so finally I went to Bali to do my yoga teacher training. I lived there for a month, did my training, got immersed in the culture, and it was just, I realized that people think yoga is all physical. I thought yoga was all physical. And then I realized once I went through my training, I was like, yoga is actually 90% mental and 10% physical. Like it is so much about your brain that we don't even realize. And that's why I think it has saved me over the years so many times, because I've had concussions, and yeah, I'm a child of divorce. Like, we all go through stuff, and yoga has always been like my saving grace. And so I wanted to bring that to the snowboard world, because uh I'm not a pro snowboarder. I'm not good enough to run with the big dogs, but I knew I wanted to work with snowboarders. And so I was like, how can I do that? And for me, it was yoga. Like, I don't know, so many snowboarders I know are people who could benefit from not only the physical, but the mental side. as
Mhm.
well, whether it's been past concussions or past traumas or whatever. Like I just, yeah. So that's why I brought it into, that's how I combined the two. And yeah, people, it was really well accepted. People loved it, which made me really happy. I kind of like to grab people with the, oh, look, you can do this yoga to tweak out this trick. Like, this camel pose is a great method. And if you want to do more methods, you got to do more camels. Like, I like to grab people with that flashy stuff. But what I
Mhm.
really want to get them in is like overall wellness, like mental, physical, spiritual, like what's going on in their day-to-day lives, how are they dealing with stress, how are they dealing with family issues, like that's the stuff that I love.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think yoga is like it's such a trigger word for a lot of people, and it's so broad. Like you have the yogi that's very like they're talking about the Sanskrit words
The
and
chakras.
their bodies are perfectly aligned, and that's cool. Like I can respect that. And then you have like I would say like we're on the other side of the spectrum where we appreciate the foundational side of yoga. We see the benefits, but we're
Oh,
also like, okay, let's just let's apply this towards like modern life and our passions and things like that. So we really, I think the way we created Snoga, it's very approachable because
mm,
yoga for a lot of people, especially men,
mm,
it's intimidating and it's freaking hard. Um,
mm-hmm,
in the past, I think it has been a very feminine sport, if you want to call it, or just practice. But you're slowly seeing that transition to a lot more men. You're seeing it, when I was at Oregon State, like all the athletes had to take yoga classes. So we're in these yoga classes and there's these, big like rowers and football players. And it was so funny to watch. But you could see the benefits and the coaches made the athletes do that.
yeah,
um yeah, it's such a cool thing. And the thing I wanted to talk about with yoga in general, like granted I don't practice as often as Sarah does, but it's been off and on for me like 10 years. But we're always like, as humans, we're always chasing presence, right? Like whatever
yeah,
that is for you, whether that is snowboarding, whether that's working out, whether that's, for some people that's, I don't know, whatever. We're chasing this presence of like being able to forget about the past, being able to forget about our worries of the future, and just being fully present in this moment with whoever, whatever that is. And yoga is a great example of that, where you can go through this practice, you can feel this presence, you can forget about your troubles for the moment. And that's no different when we snowboard.
mm,
Like when you're going down the mountain at 50 miles per hour, when you land that trick that you've been trying to land for so long, like you just feel so good, that dopamine hit, that serotonin, like you're present in that moment, you're with the homies. And that's what we're chasing. That's the dragon that we're all
mm,
chasing. And it's no different with yoga. And that's what we've been trying to preach to people. Like,
yeah.
try this. Like, don't dog it, because we do have those people that are dogging it and they've never done it. If they have, they've done it for 5 minutes and, oh, this is so hard. This is not helping.
We don't have a ton of people dogging it.
Like just try it and be consistent with it and apply it towards your passion of snowboarding and see if it helps. If it doesn't, great. Like you tried it, like
Yeah.
cool, move on. But 99% of people don't.
Mm,
And that's all we're saying. Like, give us a try, because this could be not only life changing for your snowboarding, but it could be life changing for your life in general.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I took also like a yoga class in high school. I will say I didn't get into it, but I did like see the benefits, but more so I saw just how difficult it is. And I do love that you brought up like the mental side of it, because I don't think that that's brought up enough. And I think that that's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what yoga was originally like based on and founded on, was like the mental side and meditation, not necessarily the physical side. I feel like that's kind of what was brought into like a modern society, which I think is great. Like the physical side is also great. But yeah, I think the mental side is really what snowboarders could use, and like that mental resilience, especially when it comes down to fear or just like pushing through a long day, like all of that kind of stuff, I think would be really beneficial, and frankly something I need to do more of. But when you
Yeah.
were in Bali, was that for like a different kind of yoga? Like clearly I'm very uneducated in this subject, but
So we like to travel to experience like yogas from different cultures. So like last year we went to Costa Rica to do a yoga trip there. So it's kind of like we do our own self-guided yoga retreat to like better our education, because this is our business, this is our practice. And so yes, we can take classes locally, and yes, we can take classes online, but I also like, I did my massage therapy training in Costa Rica. I lived there for half a year, and I did my yoga training in Bali. And so like I like to go and be immersed in cultures, kind of like in snowboarding culture. Like we moved to Bend because we wanted to be in it. You know, we don't want to live in a small town trying to like do this. We want to be in the middle, in the midst of it. And so same thing with yoga. Like every year I like to go on these trips. We're thinking maybe next year will be India. We'll see. We have a baby on the way, so I don't know if we're gonna take a baby to India. But like, yeah, it's really just to further our education, dive deeper into the practice, open our minds. And for me, it's like kind of a reset for my you know, I teach so often, and I get really stuck in certain ways, whether it's certain movements or certain ideas of how things should be done, that every once in a while I like to do a hard reset and be like, oh, like, and get kind of like inspired and motivated again to like try different things and like incorporate other things. And so like that's kind of what our trips each year are about.
I love that. That's super cool. And I think that it's really great that you guys do that and like are constantly learning and wanting to improve. And I really appreciate that, because that's something that I'm doing too. Obviously, I didn't go to school for like movement physical therapy, so like I'm constantly learning. And I think that that's what makes it the most fun, is that you're like, okay, let me try this, see if it works. Okay, it didn't. Let's try something else. Let's read these research papers. Let's see like what's coming out. Like let's, because like the whole idea of like snowboard movement and snowboard physical therapy, physical whatever, is like very much a new topic for the most part. Like obviously there's physical trainers that have been working with Olympic athletes for a long time, but other than that, there's not a ton of stuff out there. So you're kind of like piecing things together and saying like, does this help? Does this not? And I think that that's really sick.
Yeah, and we try to do that in all realms of our business too. So like yoga is just one side of what we do. Mark is, as you said, a physical therapist, and he teaches both individually, and we have Shred 3.0, which is our workout program, which is actually our main thing right now. And it's the same thing for us. Like every year, the reason we have a Shred 3.0 is because once we had a Shred, and then once we had a Shred 2.0, and now we have a Shred 3.0 because of that exact reason. Like we're learning as we're doing this, because there's no one else who kind of set this path before. And so we're both learning snowboarding and how the body relates to it as we go. And we love feedback, and we love talking to snowboard coaches and athletes. And we love, like, we went to Utah for, what was that called? The collective?
No, that was different. I don't
Oh,
know what it's called.
oh, we went to a strength training program that was all about strength training for snowboarders in Utah. Like going to those kind of things to better our education is just, I don't know, it's kind of like snowboarding. Like you get addicted to snowboarding because of the progression. Like the second you are able to link turns, you're like, oh, like that's really cool. What else can I do? And it's kind of the same thing with this practice that we're doing. Is like, oh, these two connect. Oh my gosh, what else can like connect down the road, and how can we help people with that too? Like, yeah, it's always a progression.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. Would you guys want to just like give a few examples of like stuff that you learned, or like success stories from people of certain things that they've implemented and they're like, holy crap, this like changed everything for me?
Do you have
You
any?
have a lot of those.
Yeah, it's so hard to like pick one or two, because I'm not to be like, we get a lot of messages, and like we've been doing this for a long time, and we've grown quite a bit, so we get a lot of messages these days. But I would say the most common report that we hear back is just realizing that their body can move in a certain way, or actually realizing that their body can't move in a certain way. Because when we get to, I always say yoga is like body tests. I'm like, I don't care if you can straighten your legs and touch your toes. Like what should matter is you realizing what your body is and isn't capable of. Like this is just a bunch of body tests. That's all yoga is, or that's how we treat it anyways. And so there's so many people who message us and like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I couldn't even do that. Like, how could I, the 360 is the most common one that we hear back from, because we do a lot of rotational classes, and we do like
Yeah.
rotational core, spinal movements that are like really hard, that people are like, oh, I can't even grip my hands behind me. Like, I can't eat, my body just can't even rotate like that. And then they work on it. And then we get people who are like, oh my gosh, I threw my first 360 and it came so easy. I almost did a 5.
Yeah.
Like, so it's stuff like that that is like really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's just a lot of people with like previous knee injuries or ankle injuries who had that fear that you talked about, because they've been injured and they don't want to do it again, and just rebuilding that trust in your body, mostly on Mark's side, like the strength training side.
Fear avoidance is a real factor, and I think it's
Yeah.
a detriment to, and unknowingly, it's a detriment from the medical community, because words are so powerful, and you hear it all the time from. This is not a knock on doctors, but they say something, one thing to a patient, and that could just be like, maybe they're tired, maybe it's just their repetitive thing they see over and over, and they say, oh, you have degenerative disc disease. And a patient hears that and they're like, holy shit, like I'm gonna break in half because
Yep.
my disc is coming out of its in my spine. And you're like, whoa, 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 let's take like 50 steps back. That
Mm-hmm.
doctor just told you that you're getting older. That's inevitable for any of us. That's
Yeah.
all happens. So I see that a lot, and I try to change that narrative with people, because we get, during the winter season, it's starting, like, gosh, our DMs are just, we spend hours, we answer every single DM, because people just have questions, concerns, they have a previous injury. And granted, we have to be careful. I have to be careful with what I say, and I'm always the first to say, hey, you should probably see a health professional in person, but if you want to see me for one-on-one, et cetera, et cetera. But I try to change that narrative and change that language to being like, look, your body is so robust. Like the human body is capable of so much.
Yeah.
You can find examples throughout history, whether that's climbing Everest with a broken leg, climbing Everest blind. Like people are just doing crazy stuff, and you're afraid to twist because someone told you something. Like you got to change your perspective here, man, or girl. Like, so I see that the most, and I see the most positive results from that,
Mhm.
just immediate results. But I could, yeah, we have hundreds of stories of people sending us messages like saying thank you so much and blah, 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 blah. And honestly, that's the best part of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting over that fear, like Mark was saying, like people don't really understand what's going on inside their body. Like when they're told by a doctor, you have X, Y, and Z, they don't really know what that means. And then you look it up and the internet tells you you're dying or you have cancer. And so like, like it's just, there's so much unknown behind it. And that's what's really cool about Mark and like physical therapists is they do all the research, they're doctors in their realm. Like it's absolutely insane. So just changing the narrative to being like, actually, yeah, you did have this injury, but guess what? Our bodies are so adaptable and you can come back from it and you can be stronger. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to avoid this movement the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Power in that. And when people finally realize that, it's almost emotional too, because it gives you back freedom of your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And like not looking at just a diagnosis and looking at like your entire body. Like something I preach a lot from people is they'll be like, oh, I have pain here, or whatever. I have plantar fasciitis here, whatever it may be. And they're like, I can't do this because of this, or I have to do whatever. And I'm like, that's a factor in like not discrediting that you have that, but also looking at the entire body. Just because this one pain is stemming here doesn't mean we just treat this area. Like your whole body works as a unit. It's a whole functional system. So like, let's take a step back, like you guys said, and just like, okay, your body can come back from this. You can work on other things and build up that strength again and just like get your body moving as a whole. Yeah, you might have a limitation here and there just due to whatever injury it may be or whatever you were diagnosed with, but it's not going to control your whole life for the most part in most cases.
Totally.
Yeah.
And even like with really acute injuries, which for those of you who are listening just means like really recent injuries. I don't know if you follow Casey Willax.
Yeah.
Okay, so like when he broke his foot, it didn't stop him from working out. he
Yeah.
still worked on his upper body and his core and his single leg movement, and he still took care of his nutrition and his mental game and yoga. Like, he was constantly working on himself. And I think that's so inspiring to see, because so many times we get injured and it's the mental part that like makes us just stop everything, because we're like, oh, poor me, this sucks, I'm depressed, I can't move, I can't do what I love, like, and you just get in this spiral. But when you realize, like, okay, that limb is injured, but there's still so many things you can do. And even like with a broken foot, you can still get on like the quad machine and still work that quad. Like, there's just so many things out there that can help you work around that and just keep going.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up that example, because someone literally asked me about that today, and I was like, you can do single leg squats and lift that leg up, you can do upper body, you can do core, like there's a million things you can do, like don't let that ruin it. And like same thing for me when I broke my collarbone, like a couple weeks after, when I was like fine, I just had my little like brace on, I was like doing some squats and doing some other stuff, and people were like, what are you doing? I was like, I need to go snowboard. Like, I don't know what you think is happening.
Yeah, totally. But it's so hard. And I mean, for me too, it's mental. Like, every time you get an injury, there's that sudden like, fuck, like,
Yeah.
because people who are active, it's so hard to not be active. And so the second you get injured, it's like, I don't know, that mental toll it takes on you is just incredible. And just remembering that the little work you do put in makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think so many times people are like get injured and the first response is rest, which is true in a lot of cases for a period of time. But then that rest ends up just like keeping going. And people are like, well, I was told to rest, so I need to take 6 weeks off and rest. And I'm like, maybe not. Depends on the injury, but maybe not.
Yeah, depends on the injury, depends on the person. That's why we always tell people, like, speak to your personal provider, because unless we see you as a client or as a patient, we can't say, because every injury is different. No ACL tear is the same as another ACL tear. No patients, like, where you started when this injury happened is going to be different from where everyone else was when their injury happens. Like, so it's really on a person-to-person basis. There's no blanket statement that can be laid on. And so that's why we're always like, when people ask us questions about like their personal case, like, so we can give you a general idea, but we highly suggest talking to your personal provider. And if you don't have one, we can help you out with that. But we need to know what your case is like.
Yeah, 100%, especially when it comes down to like a actual injury that you have.
Yeah. And you're saying that shift in medicine in general is where we're now treating the patient, not the injury, like you just said. Because every patient will tell you what they need, what the issue is. You just have to listen. That's the hardest part is everyone's always waiting to speak and say their part. But everyone will always tell you what they need and what needs to be done. So
yeah, so basically what I would love for you guys to just kind of like give out to people is, obviously you have your own services, you have like yoga mats people can buy and a bunch of other stuff. So if people are dealing with like any of these injuries, or they live in Bend and might be able to see you or whatever it may be, or just want some more information, can you just relay what it is that you do and where they can find you? And then
yeah, so we're Mobility Duo on most platforms, and the best way to see all of our services is just mobilityduo.com. We have Shred 3.0, which is our 12-week workout program. We have Snowga, which is yoga for snowboarders. We have a concussion program that just got released, which is really cool. We've collaborated with a lot of other professionals on that. We have a healthy knee guide, which is an ebook. We have so many different resources that people can use. So the best way to check that out would be our website at mobilityduo.com.
don't have it, we can find someone who does.
Yeah.
100%. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Really brought the value to people. So if you guys don't already follow Mobility Duo, definitely go follow them over on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. And yeah, have a good rest of your night, you guys.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
for
having
having
us.
us.
Of course.
Bye, Kaylee.